We're now going to consider how we can use our information and knowledge about our customers' willingness to switch to try and lock them in. So, basically, how do we increase the switching cost our consumers face? So just to recap, consumers will only switch if the cost of switching are smaller than the combined utility increase from switching and the goodie that they would be given from switching. Right? So you've got the goodie here, you've got the additional utility that they get if they switch, and this is the switching cost that they're facing. So old suppliers, the ones with the current consumers, will seek to lock in consumers by increasing the switching cost. But how do they do this? How can a supplier increase consumer switching costs? Well, through the loyalty programs that we spoke about. Right? So that makes it more costly to actually switch. And we're going to look at this actually a little bit later in this video. Long-term contracts. If you sign someone up over on a long-term contract, then that of course means that during the duration of this contract, he's unlikely to switch because he would have to pay you out to be able to exit the contract. The sale of complementary products. The more a consumer has bought, that makes my system, that makes my product profitable, for example, complementary products, the less likely he's going to be to switch because it would mean that he would have to recover, he would have to repurchase all these complementary products for the new product, for the new good, right? And that's going to increase the switching cost that he faces. How else could he try and increase consumer switching cost? Well, by offering specific software, by offering specific data formats. In this case, switching would entail either converting the entire database, the entire data formats and so on, or to rebuilding it from scratch, both of which can be very expensive or very time-consuming, or both. Building specific interfaces gives a consumer sort of a touch and feel of working with a particular program, with a particular system, with a particular product. Now, if that means that switching means foregoing, leaving the specific interface, it's something that you have to relearn. The consumer has to relearn, which again will take him time, will take him effort, and that might put him off switching altogether. And finally, you remember that I mentioned the friendly smile that you get if you go to your favorite restaurant. So offering close personal customer service is something that will increase the psychological switching cost for a consumer of actually going to a different supplier. And so close personal customer service is actually a very good and very effective way of making consumers stay with you and not switch. So looking at a short and video quiz before we're actually going to go and look into one of these ways of increasing switching costs in a bit more detail. Or one of the mechanisms of trying to get consumers to stay with you are the loyalty programs that I mentioned. Now, let's have a close look at one particular loyalty program. That's Lufthansa's loyalty program, Miles & More, which is, of course, part of the Star Alliance. So how does that work? Well, you gather miles, you accumulate bonus miles, and you accumulate status miles. And how does that work, and what are the consequences of that? So you gather miles by flying Lufthansa and partner airlines, and by making purchases with a Lufthansa credit card from retail partners, by purchasing from retail partners. This means that you get bonus miles. These bonus miles you can use to make free flights and to get bonuses with either hotels, partner hotels, or car rental companies. The third building block of the loyalty program is that you accumulate status miles. And these status miles will translate into status, into different tiers of status. So you can be a frequent traveler, a senator, or you can be part of the Hon Circle, which will give you booking advantages, it will give you better services, it will give you lounge entry, depending on the status that you've actually that you've accumulated. So that's kind of an example of a loyalty program, and you can see with these three elements, you gathering miles, being able to use those miles, and then getting some additional benefit, it's actually quite an intricate program. And what are the mechanisms that are actually at work? What are the things we can identify as ways of increasing customer switching cost? Well, first of all, you basically give a bulk discount. So the more you buy, the cheaper it gets. But interestingly, in the regular Miles and More program, it comes with an expiry date. So after a certain year, so after the expiry of a calendar year, your miles are going to expire. So that gives consumers an incentive to actually accumulate miles over the space of a year, right? So if you were just close to the end of the year, you will have an incentive to just spend a little bit more, maybe to get to the next tier, and so on. The bonus that you can use actually grows disproportionately fast. So if you've accumulated some miles or some status, it's easier to accumulate more miles. And finally, or thirdly, there's an important element here which makes the loyalty program actually very attractive for firms too, because the awards, which basically come in the form of free flights, will actually cost Lufthansa less than what they're worth to the consumer. So a consumer will think of booking a flight, and that would otherwise cost him 200 euros, but he can use his miles to do it. Okay, so he actually gets he gets something that's worth 200 euros for him. But for Lufthansa, putting someone on a flight that ideally would not be booked out is actually is less costly than these 200 euros. So in that case, these awards are actually easy to give for Lufthansa because they're cheap for them, but they're expensive to the consumer, or they're worth a lot to the consumer. And finally, we have an element of bribery where basically employees, so often if people go on business trips, it's the employees that will choose the flight, the specific flight and the specific carrier, and they will earn the awards, but companies often pay. So that means that consumers will do whatever's in their best benefit, whereas someone else would pay for it. So thank you for staying with me. To actually maintain our consumer base and to consider all the aspects that are important to do so, it's essential to keep in mind that we're not the only strategic player in this game. Customers, of course, do not appreciate being locked in, and they do not want to abandon their freedom of choice over products and over services. And so they have strategies too, as we'll see in the next video.